My dad was a search and rescue volunteer for a lot of my life, and he had read
Wow.
tons of books on survival.
Yeah.
What survivors do is they acknowledge they're in crisis, and then you need to have a future memory that you can hold on to keep pulling you forward. And those are
Mhm.
like those are the only things. Those are the things that have got me through.
Welcome to Rising to Resilience, the podcast where we explore real stories of authentic struggle, strength, and ultimately hope and transformation. I'm Sharon Hugick, and I am convinced that resilience isn't just about bouncing back and white knuckling it. It's about who we become in the process of going through really hard things. Each week, we'll be exploring conversations with people who have faced devastatingly hard heartbreak, loss, unexpected challenges. Yet, even through that pain, they've discovered new strength, they've found purpose, and somehow even joy on the other side. If you are in the middle of a storm right now, or if you're just looking for hope and encouragement for the journey, this is a really good place. Here, my hope is that you'll find perspective and resources and practical tools, but also give you something to cling to, because hope is what it's all about. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. I'm excited, Katie, to talk with you today. And we have a mutual friend who was like, Sharon, you need to talk to Katie. And so, like all good moms, I think I stalked you on Instagram and found you,
And vice
um,
versa.
and vice versa, right? I think you're out on the West Coast.
Yeah,
Am I
I'm in
remembering
Las
that?
Vegas. Yeah.
In Las Vegas, right? Um, and you have a story that's complicated, obviously, and the challenges, especially specifically that your middle child has faced, and you as a mom navigating all those twists and turns. But I know you were already leading a nonprofit
Mhm.
ministry kind of focused on transformation.
Yeah.
If I have that correctly,
Yeah.
what were you teaching about prior to this?
Yeah. So, well, and I think that's the irony is I felt like we already had enough hard stuff. So, uh, in the specifically in the ministry that I was leading, it was a nonprofit ministry really focused on kind of the intersection of the gospel and then narrative. So like your personal story. So your personal narrative. So like what happened in your life? How were you shaped? Those kinds of things.
Hmm.
And then experiential learning. So I'm very like hands-on, practical, applicable. Like I don't want to just have information. I want to know how do I grow and change? How do I like put things to life? But that whole ministry came out of my own story of healing and growth.
Mm.
Like even backing up further, my husband and I have 3 kids, and probably by about 8 years ago, we realized all 5 of us were neurodivergent, and both my husband and I realized, like, "Oh, there's a lot in our stories too." So we, like, pursued a lot of therapy, healing, read books. So there's, like, all this, like, growth and adjustment before the hard stuff hit, and it really felt like we'd already been through enough, we didn't need more.
What was the message that you were sharing with people that you felt like you had learned?
I think the biggest message was that transformation was possible. And my biggest question of my faith is like, can we actually change? Like, we as people, as humans with flaws and histories and pasts, like, is it possible for us to change? And then how does that happen? Because I was very much like a performance based person, or perfection is a better way to say it, not just performance, but
Yeah.
like perfection. Like, if I just try hard enough, my behavior can be good enough. I can be good enough. I can produce enough. I can succeed, excel. And that just left me exhausted. And when I had kids, I kind of like hit my wall and I ended up being kind of an angry mom, like yelling. And I hate that I did that. That was part of my story. And that was the thing
Yeah.
that pushed me to be like, okay, do we change? And so I hated that I ever yelled at my kids when I would get overstimulated, overwhelmed, and kind of just the chaos of being in a neurodivergent family. I learned later, like, yeah, there's reasons why. I just needed to learn what needed to change inside of me and what I needed in our environment, in our home, what our kids needed. And so the message, I guess, was what I learned like through that season that I thought was like all the growth I
Big.
wanted for life was that transformation was possible and that I could heal and grow and change. And um, like I wasn't stuck the same and I wasn't stuck as an angry mom. There were layers to change that I got to walk through and experience.
And then all of a sudden your child is getting ill.
Yeah.
Yeah. When did you first realize that something wasn't right?
So, yes, that's a good question because I look back now and hindsight, like, gives you so
Yeah.
much clarity, right? So I will tell you as I experienced it, but then I will share, like, what I understand now. June 4th, 2024, what I thought was a severe OCD flare for my son that over the next 6 weeks, he declined so significantly that, he ended up being confined to, like, 1 square in our living room, and he wasn't eating, he wasn't drinking, he wasn't sleeping. The truth is, like, he had been battling OCD for about 3 to 4 years prior to that. So I had started noticing, and then honestly, like, what is sad to me and our story is my son doesn't just have OCD. I assumed it was OCD because I have OCD traits. I'm like, yeah, this is just this mental health thing. But the severity from June 4th, 2024 for the next 6 weeks, he declined so severely and so intensely. Um, I've never seen anyone live through something like that. And we got to the point where I don't, just as a mom, like to share this, it's such
Yeah.
a painful part of our life and our story. His situation was so severe. We knew he needed more care than we could give him at home. And my husband is a family physician, and he's like, like, our son needs to be somewhere where he can receive more care. And because this looks like mental health, he needs to be in residential treatment.
Right.
And I, as a mom, am like, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, I couldn't get there, but I watched him declining so severely. And we now know, like, probably almost to the point of death, that I remember being in my car and releasing, like, okay, God, at the end of the day, everything that happens in all of life, the only thing I actually want for my 3 kids is that they know and walk with you. And so everything else is extra. I knew that whatever needed to help him was the right step rather than holding on to, like, what I felt I needed. So that day I released, like, in prayer to God, okay, if residential treatment is the right step for him, then I release that and I'll take that step.
Wow.
And then that night, a colleague of my husband said, hey, have you talked to this mutual friend whose son has this illness called PANS? And it sounds like your son. So, I mean, within, like, hours of me releasing, like, okay, we can pursue residential treatment, my husband ended up calling the mutual friend whose son has this illness called PANS. PANS stands for Pediatric Acute Neuropsychiatric Syndrome.
Okay.
um, and it's an illness where the immune system misfires and attacks the brain. And typically the part of the brain that it attacks is the part that controls emotions, learning, processing, motor control. And the 2 markers of PANS is OCD and restrictive eating. So not eating enough or having a lot of rules around eating. So often what we see as, like, acute severe OCD or acute severe restrictive eating in children may be a medical illness, not just a mental health illness. And it doesn't always have to be acute. So that's the part where, like, I look back now and I'm like, oh no, 3 or 4 years ago was probably when PAN started. June 4th was probably the day where we saw the first severe flare. So then, thankfully, like, my husband is a family physician. He had colleagues who were willing to work with him. So my husband and our son's pediatrician, they worked together to make a quick medical plan. My son started responding within 24 hours to the medical treatment, that the, like, first initial layer, but he was so severe that he needed to be hospitalized. So my husband drove him to a hospital an hour and a half away that had an understanding of PANS. And there's only 3 or 4 hospitals in the US that actually have a grasp of PANS. Not everyone validates it, even though it is recognized by the American Academy of Pediatrics. So my husband drove him. My husband ended up being in the hospital with him for 12 days, and we
Oh my
had no
gosh.
idea that it was going to be that long in the hospital. But he responded to medical treatment. Yeah, so that's the initial. Your question was, when did we know?
Yeah.
That's the initial, like, that's
Yeah.
when we knew something was not right.
Well, I mean, and what I'm imagining is everything is in chaos and there's fear and there's stress and confusion and unknown.
I think the feeling was realizing, like, okay, he's declining so quickly and so badly. The most loving thing I can do is get the most appropriate treatment for what's happening to him.
Yeah.
I, like, as a mom, so I have 3 boys, neurodivergent kids, so that already puts me in a kind of like a, like, higher protective category because I have to
Hmm.
navigate their world differently and explain the world to them and them to the world in a different way.
Hmm.
I think that shift for me was realizing whatever is the most appropriate care is the most loving thing I can do. And then,
Right.
like, more of our story is then we ended up moving across the country and selling most of our belongings because we found out that there was toxic mold in our home that was part of what was making him sick.
My
So
gosh.
as a family, we let go of most of our like, any fabric, furniture, like, anything that could have mold, and then we put most of our belongings in storage. Moved out to Las Vegas because it's a desert, and so we did whatever we could to try to help our son heal, and that helped. I mean, there's so many things that ended up helping our son. It's been a long journey. He's still healing. This isn't over for us, like, we're still in this.
I don't wanna put words into your mouth, but, like, all of a sudden you've already had it complicated, you've already had your big breakthrough, and then you're seeing your child just I mean, dissolve
Yeah,
really radically.
yeah.
And then what were the questions that you were having to ask
So
about
I
your
think
faith?
so I will share that I don't know that these are all answered still, and I actually really feel okay with that tension at this point. There are moments where I was like, "I need an answer," but some of my biggest questions I mean, I've, like, loved and followed Jesus since I was a little girl. I think in some ways that's been so helpful because there's a very clear purity for me in all of my life that I'm following Jesus.
Huh.
So walking through this, there's, like, been this mixture that I cannot always reconcile of I see God at work,
Hmm.
and yet watching my son go through some of the worst suffering I've ever known anyone to go through, and God not healing him in those moments when my husband and I are, like, full in faith praying, and I've watched my son pray and ask God, I have been so angry, and I think the only reason why I still have faith and still walk with God is because I took that anger to him. So I have these moments where I've gone to him, and I've got my fists
Yeah.
in the air, and God, in my prayer space, I'm very visual. I could see him standing in front of me, and I just would, like, pound on his chest and be so angry, like, "Why is this happening, and why won't you heal him right now?" And what I sensed was, like, God was okay with my anger,
Yeah.
and I could feel, like, almost as though he, like, could hold me in that, like, I'm so angry and I'm pounding on his chest, and I think that is like, my desire to be fully disclosed with God about how I'm feeling is the only reason why I'm still walking with God through all of this. And then simultaneously, I see God working. Like, we needed to pursue a medical treatment we were gonna have to pay for out of pocket, and friends and family funded that. We chose to move to Las Vegas, and we ended up renting a furnished rental home that is on the edges of Vegas, but it's calm and clean, and the air is clean. We tested it for mold because at this point, we're kinda traumatized because our
Understandably.
kid's brain is so fragile. But we got out here and we didn't know this at the time, but it backed right up to open desert. And so I grew up in Nevada. And when we like realized, oh, we're just like right at open desert, that was like a gift of God to me, to our family. Our two other boys will go explore, like they have space. After all this trauma, there's been these moments of provision. So with God, there's this freedom for me to be angry and he still holds me. And this freedom for me to be like, why aren't you healing my
Yeah.
son? And he accepts that. And then he keeps providing financial provision, like where we live, like every step of the way. So my son actually had a third. So there's been 3 hospital stays. This last summer, he declined again severely, and it was very, very scary. We ended up at a hospital that could do a specific treatment. We like drove 7 hours. We're sitting in the ER, and the with this illness, like whether or not you're going to get admitted to the hospital is a big question. And he needed treatment, but we didn't know if it was going to
Wow.
happen. And they're saying like it doesn't look like we're going to admit him, which means he won't get the treatment he needs. And it was very like very
Oh my
severe decline
gosh.
this past summer, so recent. And one of the boys said, "Let's pray." And the 4 of us prayed in that ER room. And then, like, moments later, the doctor came in and said, "Yeah, we're going to admit him." And so I have all these moments of like, God is there. And then why is he not doing what he's doing? And I'm choosing to just accept that both things are true.
Yeah.
I don't have further answers aside from the other thing that I can like hold on to is the world really is this hurting and broken, and it is fractured, and we live in a hurting, fractured, broken reality. And part of that, like part of my experience with my family is walking
Yeah.
through a world that is hurting, and this is how
Yeah.
that is playing out in our lives. And so God is still
Yeah.
here, but not everything is resolved yet.
Yeah. Yet. You started out with a ministry of transformation. If I know anything about really hard things, it takes transformation into a whole new, not just level, but like, I think of it as like literally melting. What did it change in you? How are you different now?
Yeah. Yeah. So we decided very quickly to leave Tulsa and move to Vegas because we wanted our kid to be alive. And so we needed his brain to be in the safest environment possible. We drove across the country with our three kids in our minivan. This is when our kid is still very, very sick. And while we drove across the country, I sat there in the backseat of our van and I just felt like my heart had shattered, like shattered. Because for me, it wasn't just this illness, like we lost this whole life I had built. So we were a homeschool family, neurodivergent. I had lived for a decade in that mode of creating this home that was built on play and chapter books and art and Lego and like our life was so rich. And so when we packed that up and took a few belongings across the country, and my kid is really sick, and then one of our other kids had a really hard time with the move. It just felt like my heart shattered. We get to Vegas. I remember just feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I don't know what my life is. I don't know. And I remember God telling me, who you are is what you bring to the table. And so letting go of this whole life and all these things I had invested. But I think that truth was more than anything I had created, more than where I lived or what my home looked like or being able to get anything right, because it definitely didn't feel like I was getting anything right at that moment. Like I was still offering myself to my family and I was still showing up as who I was to my family, no matter what my like external tangible circumstances looked like.
Wow, that's beautiful. I mean, that's a clarity that I think we all crave of like, what am I supposed to do right now?
Yeah.
Gosh, like I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And then to hear you need to be you, what you are, who
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah.
Did did that bring you peace? What did that give you comfort?
Yeah, I think comfort. So that's the other I would say comfort is a huge piece of, like, my transformation the last year and a half too. I had been so production-oriented, perfection-oriented, achievement-oriented that and I thought I had gone through so many hard things, which I had, and those are all valid. But when you go through crisis, something changes. And so, yes, that those words brought comfort because there was a letting go of everything else. And I still had value showing up as me. And then also realizing like comfort is valuable. So in the last year and a half, that was another big transformation is like to get through this, like we need as much gentleness as we can. We need as much small joys as I can incorporate in our day, whatever that looks like. And not just for our kids, but my husband and I, like we are the ones carrying this. So how do we keep going through this? And that looks like finding simple joys, simple comforts. Like I have different teas I drink throughout the day, like chamomile at bedtime and black tea in the morning. And it's small, but it's something that I look forward to throughout my day that keeps me going. So that was a huge piece of change too for me was valuing comfort, valuing like supporting myself and all of us through crisis, whatever that looked like. And I think that looked very different than I expected.
Right. Have you found a community? You left what sounds like a rich community in Tulsa, but I mean, have you begun to replace that? Have you found that group of people yet?
So community has always been hard because we are different as a family.
Okay.
We never really fit in any box. So that was kind of challenging, except I will say we fit very well in the Pokemon community. So
Yeah. Okay.
my family is
Cool.
very, very into Pokemon and we fit like a T in that community. That works for us.
That was your people.
Those were our people, yes.
Yeah.
And then I think the hard part about PANS, is it is so isolating because the truth is, like, my son is medically ill, but it's presenting primarily as a mental illness with severe OCD restrictions, severe eating restriction. And culturally, like, we look at OCD as like, "Oh, tidy and neat." OCD is the worst thing you can imagine. It's not about being tidy and neat. It is about trying to stay safe when your mind is running with the worst things you can imagine. And so you do whatever thing you can do to try to keep it calm inside your brain, which looks like repetitive words, repetitive actions, not having certain things in your vision, like within your visual sight. It's trying to make yourself feel safe. And so kids with PANS, it's a medical illness, but it's presenting as mental health, and it gets so extreme that you're not as a family, like, you're not in a place to connect with other people. So you don't have people over and you don't go anywhere. But in terms of finding a community, that's one of the things that is difficult with this illness is you're not really able to connect. So the people like, what we need for community is people that reach out to us, which sounds really selfish, except that it's that severe. I have a couple of women who have consistently showed up on Zoom, and that's been my community for
Yeah.
my support. My husband has a friend or two who like, has cared about him at different moments, but no, it doesn't look like we don't have community in that sense, but we have people all
Right.
over the world who will text or ask or pray or show up, and so maybe, like, a better way to say that is we haven't found community necessarily in, like, the everyday life, but we have
Yeah.
this massive community surrounding us and
Building you up.
specific people who've checked up and prayed that I am blown away by. That's a better way
Wow.
to say it.
And those relationships, if you could say, like, this is where it's either the most beneficial to receive or the most supportive, if somebody has a friend who is in your similar circumstances, like, what could you teach them to do,
Hmm,
or show them how supporting you or someone else like you, what would be
yeah.
the way someone could help?
Man, if you ever know anybody with a kid with this illness or
Yeah.
any severe childhood illness, I would say it's probably the same for anybody, but definitely with this illness, just check up, but don't expect a response because they may not be able to. And then if anyone with kids with this illness, if anyone ever shares what it's really like, because it's so personal, like you want to protect your kid. You don't want to overshare their reality. If they ever share anything with you, the only response you need is I would say an expletive, but I won't. But like, dang, that's hard. Like, acknowledge the difficulty of what that parent, that child, that family is facing. And then, if you have capacity, asking, how can I help? How can
Yeah.
I support? The worst thing you can do is give advice or try to fix it. Or, probably the worst and most hurtful thing is to pull that parent up into positivity. Like, that is the last thing they need to hear. And that's the last thing they're going to attach to you. And most likely, they'll shut down anytime they hear, like, look for the silver lining because it's the most horrific ordeal a child will ever go through that I can imagine. I mean, there probably
Yeah.
are equally horrific, but it's one of the worst things to see a child go through. And then as a parent, you are just struggling for survival every day to keep your kid going. And then if you have other kids, to keep them going too. So check in. If they share anything, it's just that like affirmation, like, yeah, that's hard. And then if you have capacity, asking how you can support.
Yeah. Before we started recording, we made a brief reference to the fact that it is very hard for church culture, especially like white American church
Yeah.
culture, to not try to tie things up with a bow.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally to our faith is this idea that somehow hard things will still be used for good.
Mm,
There's this desire, I think, for the Christian church to sort of be like, it's going to be good. It's going to get better. There will be something good that comes out of it.
yes.
And I know that I used to be that person.
Me too.
I used to be that person. I'm not her anymore. And I think one of the hardest things for somebody who shares our faith is to just stand in the fact that sometimes it doesn't resolve.
Yeah. Um, I keep having this quote come to mind while you're sharing because I think it has been helpful, but then it's also painful. I've listened to the pastor Matt Chandler preach sermons, and I remember him saying, "Healing will be mine this side of heaven or the next." And I love that on one hand because I know, okay, as a follower of Jesus, I believe that all things will be made right this side of heaven or the next. But then walking through this with my son and watching his suffering it is difficult to accept that someone could live a life of pain. And I think the American white Christian church culture has a difficult time reconciling that you can follow God and have a lifetime of pain. I find that it is hard for a Christian culture to hold ongoing pain this side of heaven that won't be resolved. The biggest thing that I think I'm learning the church could do better is sit in the pain without trying to fix it or move it into praise or move it into like positivity and instead acknowledge the pain. And then I think what God is like starting to show me is his whole desire is to be with me, to be with my son, to be with my husband, to be with our other two boys, like, more than us being morally good people, going to church, singing praise songs, or finding, like, the silver lining or always focusing on the good that's gonna come out of this. His desire is not that we produce something, not that we praise, not that we're positive, but that he wants to walk with us in this. And so when you're sitting in that place of pain, that's really like the goal is, are you walking with God in the pain? And that's kind of
Mhm.
like what we have this side of heaven.
It reminds me of something that a dear friend of mine shared about lamentation.
Mm,
So lamentation is not just a book of the Bible, but it's also throughout the Psalms. When you're in pain and suffering, you bring that frustration, anger, sadness to God.
yeah.
And you basically be like, what the heck?
Yes.
But
Yes.
probably not the polite version of it. Like, where did you go? How long, God? Enough already. I did what you asked me to do. Like all the things
Yes.
that you and I have been expressing. And then hitting this kind of pivot moment in that where it'd be like, yet I know you are still holy.
Yes.
Yet I know you are still good.
Yes.
And even yet I trust you.
Yeah.
And she pointed out to me, like, where in our popular Christian church culture do we do that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I know how much I crave other women's
Yeah.
stories that where it might not even be the same thing, yet there's like, she knows what hard feels like.
Yeah.
She's been there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not the only ones.
Yeah.
There's lots of people out
Yeah.
there. And I would have to imagine even more so when you're dealing with such a rare or kind of newly diagnosed situation like what you're
Yeah.
confronting with your child.
Yeah.
It's just hard.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you talked about the lamentations. I will say that's even been shared with us, but it's often with this like pressure to get to the end trust point or the praise point without staying in the pain. Because my husband and I have actually talked about this, and I think the part no, but I think that what I'm feeling when you're saying that is I think we sit in the pain, like, "Where are you, God?" And then that last piece, what you're sharing is like, "And I still trust you." That can only be done when it's genuine and it's a place of surrender. And so I think what happens is we learn all these things in church culture to say or do, but there's something different when you're living it out and there are days where I don't know and I wrestle in that. And then yet I still do surrender to that place of trust, but it looks so gritty now. And I'm imagine like in real life, those lamentations, the people who were writing them, it was also gritty for them. But in church culture, we have to be careful not to
Yeah.
oversimplify to get
There's
to that
nothing
praise
simple
place.
about this.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
gritty. And
It's raw. I mean,
yeah.
there's boogers and tears and it is not pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is uncomfortable
Yeah. Yeah.
for other people to hang out there with us.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yet, thankfully, progress, thankfully, transformation. I have said this so many times now, but I am so much nicer.
Yes.
I'm so much less. I mean, I used to be the person that would look at something and be like, well, you're just not doing it right. And
Yeah.
I hate that. Yet, when we talked in the beginning, like I used to be her
Yeah.
that was uncomfortable. Like I wanted it to wrap up in a pretty nice bow.
Yes. Me too.
And, so I can't really be that judgmental of
Yeah.
who I used to be.
Yep. There's so many things that there are moments where we've had amazing responses in kindness, and then there have been some responses that are not helpful. And yet, so often, like, I was that person too because I hadn't lived through something like this yet. And so there's grace for where people are. And then there's also being honest about what is or isn't helpful. And like, that's part of what I get to share too, and try to share it kindly when I can.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you meet people now, I mean, have you been able to connect with other Pan's moms or Panda's moms?
So, mostly online because of the isolating nature of Pan's like, the best way that Pan's parents connect is online because
Yeah.
everyone's isolated. I will say Pan's moms are warriors, and it's primarily a mom community. However, my husband is the one who really cares for our son, and so he's
Mm,
the dad in the Pan's community of all the Pan's moms, and then I've kind of been on the other like, my role has been to make sure our other 2 boys have kind of a life of normalcy. So I actually haven't connected as much into the PANS community. There is one
wow.
mom online who shares their journey so well, and reading her information has been the most soothing for me.
Yeah. Who's that?
Her name's Lucy, she's from England, but her Instagram account is parenting pandas, so parenting_pandas, and she just shares in such a relatable way about everyday life and this illness and how it impacts you as a parent, your kids, your family, and that's been, like, the place that I've connected, but really, like, my role has been to free my husband up. So he works from home and he cares for our son, and he's in the room with since this summer, he's been in our son's room with him around the clock, just supporting him
Wow.
and working from home. And then my role has really been, um, giving our other 2 boys as much normalcy as possible because this illness disrupts the entire family and the entire family system.
I'm glad that you brought that up because I wanted to ask about how do you guard them from losing their childhood?
I mean, that's been one of the most painful things. They are forever changed because of this, and I do believe that there are good things that have come out of this, but there's also pain and trauma, and so, for a long time, we were just trying to support all 5 of us. So, like, initially, June 2024, when this all started happening, my goal was, like, what does each person need, and how do we make that happen? Our son declined hospital stays, moved to Vegas, he starts to get better, and then last summer, he declined so severely, it was really scary again, and at that point, that's really when my husband and I were like, "Okay, we need to have like, my husband will be with him because he's the one who's supportive for my son, and I'll be with our other 2 boys." So we're still in the same home,
Yeah.
but to like, the impact of this illness and the stress in the home of trying to support a child with, I mean, like, almost life-threatening level OCD, eating restriction, that impacts the other kids so hugely that being able to kinda separate and be like, "Okay, my husband's with our middle son, I'm with our oldest and our youngest," and then, like, I kinda just, like, leaned into how do I create normalcy for them? So we started going to the pool every day. It was summer. Like, we went to the movies so many times this summer because it was just a happy escape, and Vegas is hot in the summer, like, you don't wanna go out.
Yeah, you're not gonna hang
I
outside.
mean, so many times to the movies. I homeschool them, so we, like, started our school year in August and got that going and tried to get
Yeah.
back to, like, kind of our healthy because we're also still a neurodivergent family, so they have some,
Yes.
like, unique nervous
Significant.
systems. Yeah, how their brains are wired. Novelty, creativity, like, we needed those things to come back. So that was really my focus was how do I create normalcy for them? And that's I don't think it prevented them from the trauma of this, but I think on some level, it gave them a little more stability once we kind of went
Yes.
zone instead of, like, all our family together.
But that must be really heavy for your marriage.
So I will say, this is another cool part of our story is we both have a lot of, like, family of origin stuff we've worked through, generational trauma, like, there's a lot in our histories. Our marriage has been hard, a lot of our marriage. So we've been married I think we've been married 16 years, and in the spring before my son's severe flare started, we started working through a really helpful marriage book, and husband was actually in trauma therapy for a little while, and our marriage changed that spring before this hit. And I know that was God preparing us. And our marriage has been one of our strongest things through this season. And, like, any chance we get to see each other I mean, we still have, like, squabbles or, like,
Yes, of
we have to
course.
deal
You're
with
still
hard
human.
stuff. Yeah, we have to deal with finances and medical treatment and navigating, like, other kids and what do they need, and we have our moments, or we're exhausted, and one small thing can just, like, "That hurt my feelings so bad." But we grew so much and healed so much right before this hit that our marriage has been a source of strength and comfort for us.
That's amazing. Somebody said to me about our other children at one point, like, I have been praying that they come through this with empathy. And that
Mm.
really struck me because I was like, yeah, if they could go through this heavy, hard stuff, yet
Mhm.
come out of it with a heart that is kind
Yeah.
towards people.
Yeah.
And so I pray that a lot, that if somebody could rise out of this with kindness in their
Mhm.
heart towards those who are
Yeah.
struggling, well, that wouldn't be such a bad thing, you know? Like, all right, I'll pray for that. Yeah. If you knew that somebody was listening to this and sort of sitting in this dark place right now,
Mm.
and you could share with them something about God's presence, what would you want to point them to? Or what would you offer them?
I would tell them 2 things. The first is hold nothing back in how it, like, if you pray or talk to God or how they, like, how you talk to God, hold nothing back. So when you're talking with God, like, go to the very depths of what you're feeling, the questions you have, because I think only there will you be able to continue walking with God through something like this. If it is that dark, here God already knows anyway, so, like, you're not keeping a secret from God, but it's the only thing that will allow you to stay in connection with him, is go to wherever your heart, like, the deepest, darkest, hardest questions, and let him meet you there, let him be with you there. And then the second thing is more of like a practical, not as much spiritual, but when we were packing up our homes, we were selling our home, packing our things. I was doing that with our other two kids. My husband was staying at an Airbnb with our middle son, who's the one with PANS.
Yeah.
And my dad came out to help me pack up our house for a week. He came out and I asked him, like, how do you keep going when you're in something like this? And my dad's a very, like, calming presence, very calm person. So he didn't answer me right away. He gave me, like, an answer. But that night, got our kids to bed. I came downstairs. My dad and I had been packing all day. And I sat at the kitchen table and he was like, hey, Katie, this is what you need to know. And so this is what I would tell anybody in any crisis, in any dark moment. My dad was a search and rescue volunteer for a lot of my life, and he had read tons of books on survival. And he was like, this is what survivors do. It's like, this is what you need to know. Survivors of, like, and he was talking, like, in terms of, like, search and rescue survival, like
Sure. Yeah.
avalanche, lake, like, close to drowning situations. What survivors do is they acknowledge they're in crisis. And he, like, looked at me, and I still remember, like, this is one of the most meaningful moments. He was like, you guys have done that. You acknowledge you're in crisis. And then the thing that you need to do is you need to have a future memory that you can hold on to keep pulling you forward.
Yeah.
And I remember him, like, just sitting with me being like, "Do you have a future memory that you can hold
Mm.
on to? Because when your world is falling apart, you can't see anything else." And he said, "The people who survive acknowledge they're in crisis, and they have something in the future that they're holding on to that's helping them get through that worst moment of their life." And it's been little things, like, at that moment, there was just this one picture I have of something my husband and I would do, like, just like a sitting on the back patio with a favorite drink. That was my future memory that kept me going, and at different moments through this, there are these, they don't have to be big, it doesn't have to be like this, magical trip someday that you're gonna take. It can be as simple as watching a sunset with someone you love, this book that hasn't come out yet that you know is coming out. Whatever it is, it's something that you hold on to in the future that keeps you moving forward. So if you're in a dark place, acknowledge you're in crisis, look at that future memory and keep that in front of you, and let God know how angry, how scared, how confused you are. And those are like the only things. Those are the
Yeah.
things that have gotten me through.
Yeah. I love that. I've never really thought about that idea of a future memory, but there are memories that you're going to make that haven't happened yet. And that if you can visualize one of those, it gives you something to cling to work towards, to hope. Wow, your dad's a pretty wise guy. A pretty wise man. I love that. Katie, it's been a real pleasure to connect with you today, and I'm grateful that you shared your family story. I know how vulnerable it is to talk about things that are so personal. Yet it's also my prayer and hope. The whole point of these conversations is that to offer hope to other women who may feel really lonely right now.
Yeah.
You have an Instagram account where
Yes.
you talk about your family's journey, you share things that you've learned. And would it be okay then for people to reach out to you and connect with you there?
Absolutely. Yes.
And I'll be glad to add a link to that in the show notes of this, as well as Lucy's Instagram,
Yes.
Parenting Pandas, so
Yeah.
that people can find help through both of you and those resources. The final question I ask everybody: how today would you define resilience?
Yes. So, I don't remember the exact reference for this, but when a storm hits, trees that are, like, rigid break, but trees that bend with a storm survive. And there is a book called Resilient Life by Rebecca Lyons, and she has a quote that says, "Resilience isn't unyielding willpower that pushes through any obstacle or withstands any force. Resilience allows us to be flexible and adaptable. We bend but aren't broken." And I think for me, I would describe resilience as being able to adjust with what's happening, not just trying really hard to get through.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. It's a real gift to share this time with you, Katie. Thank you.
Thank
It's
you,
great to
Sharon,
meet
so
you.
much. I
It's a
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
I love that conversation with Katie, and I have thought about what her dad said multiple times since we recorded this. Survivors acknowledge they're in crisis and then they hold on to a future memory. And it's funny because that idea seems simple, but it's not easy. But it's life-giving too. It gives you something to hold on to give you something to live for, to work towards. If you are in crisis right now, I hope this conversation reminds you that it is okay. It is okay to grieve and to feel heavy and admit that this is really hard. And I hope that you can picture one small future memory, a sunset or a quiet morning or a moment of peace, and just allow it to pull you forward. You and I know resilience, it's not that rigid strength, but it's bending without breaking and adjusting, trying again. And sometimes it's just simply surviving another day. But you're not alone.